Hi folks, this is Meredith from the Papery Craftery, and today we're going to be making some quilling paper pansies. And pansies can come in a lot of different colors, but we're going to make sort of a traditional color palette here. I have a deep purple color called Grape from Quilled Creations. I have some bright white, and then two different yellows, a paler yellow, and then a deep yellow. We're going to use a bit of that at the end. As far as quilling tools go, use your favorite. I'm going to use a needle tool. You are going to need some small scissors and your quilling tweezers, a little paintbrush. Grab that too. For glue, I have Elmer's Glue Wall in my needle nose container, and I am going to be using Aleene's Tacky Glue. And then I have my workboard covered in parchment paper and some pins just for when we start building our flower. That's going to be helpful. Now, the pansy has 3 different sections of petals, and on this version, they're all going to be different colors. Starting with the purple version, this grape color from Quilled Creations, I'm using 3 strips for each petal. The strips themselves are about 18 inches long, and I'm gluing all 3 of them end to end. So I'm going to end up with somewhere in the vicinity of, I think it's like 54 inches long. That's a more or less, so don't make yourself crazy about measuring this exact. This is somewhere around 54, 55 inches long. I tear the ends off of every piece, and then I start gluing them end to end with just a tiny little dot of glue. Try to get them as straight as you can, and you just have to hold it for a second. It doesn't really take long to do this. And at that point, you can start rolling your quilling paper up. We're going to roll it up all the way to the other side. This does get a little tricky. No matter what tool you're using, it does tend to keep kind of getting crooked on you a little bit. Don't worry about that. At a certain point, once I get it started, I take it off my tool and just roll it by hand. Feel free to do that if that makes you comfortable. It does take a little bit of time, but it's not too bad. Once I have it rolled all the way, I'm going to apply a little bit of glue to the tail and get that to set. Notice I didn't let this piece open up at all. It's a very tight coil. And I can go ahead and get ready to start forming my petals. To do that, I'm just going to push down a little bit from the inside to make a slight dome, just like that. And then I'm going to pinch one side just to make a point. Doesn't have to be a really deep dome, it can be a little bit shallow. I'm going to apply some glue to that part of the petal. If you want to, you can apply it to the back. All we're doing is putting glue all over and then wiping it out with a paintbrush. That's going to keep your dome shape and your point. It's not going to let it get smushed back again. Some people get nervous about putting glue on the part you're going to see, so they would put it on the back of this part. You could also use clear glue because it's such a dark paper. If you were concerned about getting little glue bits, feel free to use clear glue for dark paper at any time. So I made 2 of those petals and I set that aside, same exact size. Now I'm moving on to the next section of petals, which are going to be white. Now I had a different brand of paper available in white. This is Craft Harbor quilling strips. So they're the same width, they're 1/8 inch, but they're a little bit longer. So I'm only using 2 strips for this demonstration, but they're going to be about 48 inches. So remember I said before, it doesn't matter what brand your paper is, you just want to get that specific length when you start gluing pieces together. So if your strips are shorter than this, glue as much together to make 48 inches in total. But very similar process to the last time. I'm going to roll them up all the way end to end, just like before. And just like before with those purple petals, it's going to start getting a little unruly. So I took it off my tool and did it by hand. A little bit of glue, just like earlier. This is going to look very familiar. Get that to stay. There we go. And exact same process for making the petals. Push down a little bit in the center and make a peak by pinching one side And again, just like before, we're going to add some glue all over, give it a little brush. And just like before, you're going to need 2 of these petals as well. So now we have 2 purple and 2 white petals. We'll put those aside and let them dry. And we're going to move on to the 3rd set of petals. Now, I'm using 2 colors together for this part. I'll show at the end a way where you don't have to use 2 different colors. You can just use yellow, but to add a little bit more detail and make it look a little bit more natural to the version I was going for in this pansy, I have 9 inches of yellow, and to that I attach 9 inches of that white, and this is a pale yellow. So you're going to look for a full piece that's about 18 inches. If you're just using one color, it's going to be 18 inches. This is 9 inches of 2 different colors. I start rolling the yellow part first because I want that to be on the inside of this coil. And just like before, got a little tricky on my tool, so I took it off and I'm just finishing it up by hand. This time, however, I'm not going to glue it right away. I'm going to let it open up just a bit in my hand because I'm going to be forming this a little bit more. And I did make 2 of them. I want them to be about the same size, so I just double check before I start gluing. Just open it up just a bit, enough that I can squeeze it a little bit more without it really hurting my fingers. After gluing that edge to dry, we're going to start making the shape. For this, we're going to pinch one side pretty hard and then the other side just a little bit, trying to keep the bottom flat with my thumbs. You can see there, I'm just trying to make it, it's not a true teardrop because it's definitely flatter on one side. And I'm going to do the same thing to this one. Big pinch and then little pinch on the other side. Big pinch, little pinch, big pinch, little pinch. Keeping it flat the whole time with my thumbs. The reason you want it to try to keep it as flat as possible is you're going to put them together on the flat sides so they're facing each other. And that's probably the hardest part of this whole project, is because those pieces just kind of want to bounce away from each other. To make it easier, we're going to be using tacky glue to put all the petals together. That'll make it a little bit easier. Takes a little bit less time to get them to stick together that way. And instead of gluing the pieces directly, I'm going to put some on my parchment paper. I find it a little bit easier to control that way. And I'm applying it with, let's get this tool here, just another needle tool. You can use a toothpick or a paintbrush, whatever you see fit, whatever you have handy. So to start off with, let's put those smallest pieces we just made together, so that's the hardest part. I applied some tacky glue to one of the flat sides, and then I'm just going to smush them together. This is going to take some effort. You can do a combination of things. You can use pins to try to put them together. I'm going to put some glue all over my hand. Just turn this way. Put some in the holes that are still left in the center to keep everything still, and then try to keep that bottom together and try to keep that top together. Mine decided to really fight me. This took quite a little bit of time on my end to get mine to be the way I wanted. I decided, you know what, let's put a little bit more glue in that peak there because it just wasn't sticking together. And if you've worked with tacky glue, you know it really does stay together pretty quickly. So I put on a little bit more glue and tried to put some pins in to really get that to stay where I wanted it. I let that sit for a couple of minutes, and then I ended up taking the pins out, but I will show that in a couple of minutes. For now, we're going to move on to gluing the white petals together, and it's a little bit easier. Just apply some glue towards the bottom of the petal, towards where the point is, and we're going to just attach the other one. And these can stay together after a few minutes of holding them in your hands. Just want to give a little bit of pressure. If you wanted to put them down on your board and put some pins around, you could, but it gets a little tricky once it's domed. So just going to get that to set just for a couple minutes and wipe away any excess with a little squeeze, and then set that aside to finish drying. And same thing with the purple petals. I'm going to put glue in the same place and just get that to stay together for a couple of minutes. Apply some pressure, and then you're going to set that aside to dry as well. And like I mentioned before, I didn't like the way that the yellow and white petals were drying. So this is when I took it away from the pins and really just pinched it into the shape that I was looking for. Just more of a point on the top, and tried to get the bottom together as much as possible. It's not perfectly flat, but that is okay. And now we can start putting all of our flower petals together to make the pansy. So to do that, we're going to glue the white and yellow section to the all white petals. So that's just a matter of a little bit of tacky glue to the top of that petal and attach it to the bottom of the white petals. So you can see at this point, you sort of are getting that pansy flower shape going here. Let that dry for a few minutes, and then we're going to attach the purple petals. And the purple petals are going to go behind the white petals. So another little dab of tacky glue towards the bottom and kind of the middle of the purple petals. And then I just sort of lay the white on top so you can see a bit of the purple rising up behind. There you go. That's about that. Now the next thing we're going to do is that's what it should look like now. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to add some detail that are really going to make this say pansy. This particular type of pansy has these very, very fine purple kind of stripes going through it. So to make that, I'm going back to that same purple paper, that really dark purple. And this gets a little tricky here, but you got this. I'm using my little scissors, and I am cutting the faintest, skinniest little lines I can. The paper that I tore off it's about maybe ½ an inch long. It's very, very small. And I just want the smallest. It doesn't matter if it's a straight cut. It doesn't matter if it goes at an angle. That actually is preferred. You don't want it to look super straight every single one. It's okay in whatever shape they end up being, whatever size. You don't want them all to be exactly the same length. So some are pointier, some are straighter. That's what we're looking for. We're going to need about 12, maybe a little bit more, just in case you get some that you don't really like. So I just make a whole pile of them, cut a few of those ½ inch chunks, and just snip a whole bunch. Now we're going to apply them to the 2 white petals and then a little bit across the yellow and white at the bottom. I'm going to do one at a time. So to do this, instead of trying to glue each individual little stripe, I ended up putting glue all over the petal and then placing the dry purple stripes on that so it sticks that way. So with my tweezers, I just pick up one and place it in there. You want it coming from the point towards the outside. There's 2, and I want to use different lengths. I don't want them all to be exactly the same. So some longer ones and some shorter ones. And it seems like at this point my glue, because it was such a thin layer of glue that I painted on there, it started to set a little bit already. So I'm going to apply a little bit more glue. No big deal. Just a little bit more to the inside there and brush that out so it's smooth. And a little bit more. tweezers just to get that in, and you'll have a little bit of wiggle room. See that one? I didn't like how it was standing straight up there, so move that around a little bit. And at this point, I'd like a shorter stripe. I think they're all kind of the same length at this point, so if I have any shorter ones I can pick up, or maybe I'll just tear one just to get it a little bit. Oh, tweezers. There we go. These are very, very small. Okay, just tear that. There we go. So now this one's going to be a little bit shorter, and I probably will have to put more glue down here because it's, yeah, okay. A little bit of glue to that corner. And once you have maybe 4 or 5 stripes in this section of petal, you can go ahead and do the same thing to the other side of the white, and then we're going to put some so they come straight down onto that yellow and white petal at the bottom. There we go. I like that. I like that little one. Perfect. All right, moving on to the other petals. And now we have one more small little detail. We're going to put sort of a center little place where the pollen would live on this flower. Now I really want it to be very thin. If you have, 1/16 inch width paper, or you have 2mm paper, go ahead and use that for this if you have it in a nice dark yellow color. I just used another 1/8 inch strip that I cut down the center. It's only about 3 inches, so that doesn't take very long. Roll it all the way up on my tool and apply a little bit of glue before I let it go, just to make a nice tight coil there. And that is going to get glued onto the center of my flower. You can see there all my finished little stripes. So I'm going to add a little bit of glue and just place it right in the center. And there you go. That is our purple and white pansy with a little bit of yellow. There's another one here. And then I mentioned earlier, if you wanted to have a little variation on this, instead of using white and yellow for that bottom petal, you would just make them out of just 18 inches of yellow instead. And there are many, many other colors of pansies. This is just ones that you see pretty often. So I decided to go this route. And it was fun adding the stripes. That was a new technique, and I thought that was pretty interesting. As always, don't forget to leave any questions you have in the comment section, and I'll answer those as soon as I can. And also look for the description box for this video, where you'll see links to all the supplies I used and all the paper I used as well. And also you'll find a link to my Buy Me a Coffee page, where I do have a bunch of extras now, so check those out. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you can be around for my next video. And thank you so much for watching. Bye-bye.